hang on. There we go. Now we have sound. Hello, I'm Susan. Welcome back to my studio, Stitched by Susan. I had a live and unscripted session this morning working on this same custom quilt that you see in front of me. So this is session 2 of this project. So if you're just tuning in tonight, I'll give you a brief update. We're working on a design called The Mountains Are Calling, or a pattern called The Mountains Are Calling by Janet Nesbitt of One Sister Designs. Maybe if Dave wants to take a minute to load a picture of the whole thing, you can kind of get a bird's eye view of the whole project. There it is. There's part of it. You might get a few pictures, but eventually you'll get one of the whole thing. Anyway, this particular group of sessions is on a custom quilting project. Now you're seeing the whole picture. So that's the entire thing that we're working on today. This morning I had everything loaded when we began. I was kind of trying to save a little time there, but I went into a few techniques very lightly as I was quilting, and mostly I've just been letting you sort of watch over my shoulder as I work. I have to kind of pay attention when I'm doing custom quilting, so it's not as easy to talk steadily as I work. But this morning we did quite a bit of stitching in the ditch on the flying geese that are in the upper area and some of the fills that are in that. We did all the details that are in the sun, kind of doing the radiating lines representing rays going out from that. And we started on the trees. So I outlined those trees as well in the ditch and then created some simple boughs kind of quilting within them. So there's thread changes going on, there's stops and starts in the middle of the quilt going on, and all kinds of things that are involved in custom quilting. So session 2 tonight, and this will be the final one. There are just the 2. I'm finishing up the flying geese and the sky areas, and this afternoon while you guys were away I did more of the trees, so there's just one left. I left one so that I could do it for any people that are just tuning in tonight and want a quick look at that, and if you want to see more details you'll have to go back to session 1. And then we'll be working on the mountains, which is my favorite part. It's the really fun part, creating some texture and almost relief in those mountains that are set one in front of another. So using feathers on the one hand, kind of stylized, and straight lines, sort of matchstick quilting to give some definition there. And then we'll be coming down finally to this grassy area at the bottom of the quilt and doing a little kind of whimsical grassy treatment in there, outlining the fox, things like that. So that's what session 2 holds. So a little bit of an overview. You're watching this on my YouTube channel. So I do these live and unscripted episodes every second Monday. So if you like what you're seeing today and you want to see more of this and this is helpful to you in your quilting journey, then please like and subscribe. And if you hit the little bell, you will also get notifications whenever a new episode is uploaded. And so you can go back and watch previous ones if you like. I've got thumbnails on them all with a picture of the quilt that's being quilted and the name of the quilting design so that you can find things of interest. Usually in these episodes I go right from the beginning, so they'll include loading and everything. And then whatever project I'm working on and whatever its features are. So it might be choosing thread for something that's got a lot of different colors in it, or it might be working with really wavy borders. Today's thing is it's a custom quilt, so there's a number of different fills and designs in this one. So that's kind of what it's all about. These sessions are always available on my YouTube channel. They're always free. But if you want to support us, and I say us because my husband is the producer, he's behind the scenes working away with all the monitors and wires and cameras and things like that. If you want to support us, then you can just go to buymeacoffee.com, and it's an easy way to make a one-time contribution if you want to do that for as little as $5, the price of a coffee, or if you choose to do a monthly coffee and cream subscription, I'm calling it. So just know that when you go to that website, choose the membership, which is a regular monthly, or choose support, which is just a one-time contribution. Either way, it's very welcome. And today I was particularly excited when we began because I am using today our brand new camera, which we've just purchased with that support money. So I've got a new camera loaded on Lucy, so all the close-up work that you're seeing is that new camera, and it is so clear and wonderful, and I'm absolutely thrilled with that. And then we were also able to purchase a new hub, so all the wires and things that are coming into the hub to go and do the streaming out to you, we've got a little higher quality and better one going on there. So hopefully that will help with some of the glitches that we've had in the past. So I think that's all the housekeeping. Shall we check in with the folks that are here before I actually start quilting? Mickey, good evening. Thanks for joining again. Good for you, from North Georgia. So it's getting late already where you are. Jill, from the front porch of my cabin on Lake Vermilion in northern Minnesota. You lucky duck, you. And Wendy Hay from the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, welcome. And Jenny, hi, watch number 1, made it almost on time for number 2. It is still warm here in Central Oregon, is for us too. Yay on the GoPro, it looks great, especially in the close-up view. Yeah, it really is nice and crystal clear, isn't it? So I'm happy about that.
Once we got it in the right place.
Once we got it in the right place. If you watched episode 1, you saw. When we began, it was just too close, and every time I moved for the ruler, my hand just obliterated everything that you could see, so we fixed that. And yeah, so that's about it. Feel free to share this if you wish on your Facebook posts or your Facebook page. I would appreciate that. The more the merrier. Okay, using my trusty favorite ruler from A1. It's just a simple 9-inch ruler. I love it because of the handle. You guys have seen me use it before. Love this ruler. So I'm just finishing up actually the very last goose and just a little bit of stippling around it, and then the geese and the sky are done. I had a wee bit of excitement about a half an hour ago. I was just doing a few of these geese, and all of a sudden my needle broke with a clatter and a bang, and I still don't know why. So I replaced the needle. That was all well and good. It's not the first time it's ever happened. Put a new one on, began stitching, and in the exact same spot, the needle broke again. And like I said, I don't know why, and I tried to figure it out, and I have no answer. Third time was a charm. Sailed right over it. Feel free to be chiming in questions into the comment box, and I will pause every half hour or so and make sure I've caught up any questions that there might be. And we've just run out of bobbin thread. No, the thread broke. Huh. And that, I'm guessing, I'll keep an eye on it if it happens again, but I am working with some quite thick seam allowances here, and that would not be the first time that just the sheer volume of layers of fabric that I'm stitching through will sometimes just shred the thread, no matter what I do. And it's kind of a balancing act, because the thicker the needle you use, the sturdier it is, of course, and less likely to break the needle, but also the more likely it is to shred the thread because it's so tight when it's going through the fabric, if that makes sense. And so I've kind of got a mid-range needle in, and I'm hoping for the best. And I am, in fact, out of bobbin thread. So bear with me while I go and load another one up. And I did not take my own advice this time. You guys who watch regularly know, usually when I put one fresh bobbin on, I pop a new one on the winder, and I thought that bobbin would be enough. So it's going to take us just a minute to wait for that to load. While we do that, Dave has a new camera angle for you guys today. Are you going to put it on the screen so I can see it, hon?
Yes, I am.
We're calling this the cat cam. So I'm into my 4th hour of quilting on this quilt, and every time I'm at the machine, he is right in that spot, curled up, just hanging out. His name is B, if anyone wonders. Actually, his name is Berlioz, but we just call him B because it's easier. And he is my quilting buddy. So I'm curious, do you guys have quilting buddies in your studio, especially if you're sitting in your studio now and working? I do love having my little cat here to keep me company. Okay, by the time I get to my bobbin, it'll probably be full. It is. I'll grab it, and we're back in business. And this one will definitely be enough. We only have a little bit of sky left to do. Sally, you're saying that you have broken needles in the same spot. I figured it was a seed in the cotton. You know, I honestly never thought of that. I just assumed it was in a seamed area, so I just assumed it was that seam somehow. And of course, I'm working against the ruler too, so you know, you're putting a little bit of pressure, pushing the needle through a bit. Anyway, The third time through, I just took it super duper slow, and it was okay. So a few lock stitches, and we're up and away. So it wasn't even actually a thread break when I thought it was. It just, when the bobbin tension was released, that top thread just sprang back out of the needle, but it was not in fact broken. I'll tell you what, I think I get as much out of these quilting episodes as you guys do. It's really enjoyable to have someone virtually in the room to chat with a little bit. So if you guys are in your studios working, I'd love to know what you're working on. Or for that matter, if you're making dinner. Love to know what you're eating. Perhaps I want to come over for some. Once more, I have a couple really thick seams here, and boy, I'm gun shy now, so I'm just creeping over them, just to be on the safe side. So the cat cam, just as a little piece of trivia, is the camera that we used to have mounted on Lucy. And so now we have a spare, right? So Dave has set that up on a little tripod for our cat cam. All right, I'm going to undo my clamps, and I have just a wee bit of sky areas on the far left side. Oh, I have to point something out to you guys before I go. So,
Did you do your loops in that one goose?
oh, okay, backing up just a little bit. Somebody's got sharp eyes. I don't know if it was you or Dave, but someone saw that I have missed the loops in my one goose. So when all that hubbub was going on, I lost track of where I was going next. So I need the loops in this goose. But anyway, after that, I'm going to show you something. A few weeks back when I was finishing up this quilt, I was laughing at myself because I got two sections of it reversed, and so the trees looked like they had gone through time travel and they had come back sort of spliced and mismatched. It's kind of comical. Anyway, replaced all those, and that was all well and good. But again, I was running kind of gun shy, so I posted a picture of the whole quilt top and invited proofreaders to give it a look over, right? So we got that all figured out. But you guys, look at this. Can you see this tree I'm hovering right over? And what do you see here? Whoops. That's all I have to say about that. Only it's staying in the quilt. When I noticed that today, I was well into quilting that tree, and I was so close to it that, boy, it just seemed beyond reason to take the whole quilt off and undo that whole area just to replace that triangle. And I thought, you know, it makes a good story. I'm just going to leave it in there.
I replaced the one camera, so I might have a few black moments when I reset the scenes.
So Dave is giving me a heads up. He changed out one of the cameras. And so whenever he resets the scenes to get them active again, you may get a couple black screens just as he's shifting. So just bear with us. It'll only be a couple seconds at most whenever he has to do that. These are just the joys of going on live. There are sometimes things you have to do. Sometimes you have to stop and put new batteries in the mic or new needles. We've certainly done that before. Dave's telling me that the rolled up part of the quilt is in the way, but if you guys are okay with it, I'm just going to persevere because I'm going to be out of it in 30 seconds. I didn't think about that. It's much better if I don't quilt all the way to the top for the purposes of your visibility. So my apologies. You got a good view of the backing. When I set out to make this quilt, I promised myself that I would make it out of my stash of existing fabric. So when it came time to choose the backing, I'm not convinced that I had the perfect thing for it. But what I ended up using is actually a sort of retro flat sheet from probably the 70s. But it's got quite a bit of the same kind of cinnamony color in it that the grasses in the sun have. So that's what I opted to go with. My mother was a quilt maker, and a very traditional one, and very much believed in using what you have. So, you know, she used whatever thread was on sale and whatever fabric she found in the sale bins, and sometimes mixed content fabric, you name it. And you know, 50 years later, I'm still using those quilts. So, to some degree, I've adopted that same philosophy. And certainly with flat sheets. And I know there are many other quilters that do it too. Sheets are best if they do not have a high thread count. They make the best backings in that case. They're really the 400, 600, 800 count. Cotton sheets are not ideal. They're just too tight a weave. But the older ones and the poorer quality ones, 200, 250 thread count, work beautifully. While I think of it, I'm just going to take a moment to run an edge stitch along this tree trunk in the sky color, because I'm not actually going to stitch anything with the gray color. But I do want that to have a nice edge to it. And we'll do the same on the other side. I think we'll just nip right across the bottom as well. I'm feeling resistance, Dave. What am I against? Tripod. 1 second. We're just moving a camera. And that, I believe, is the last of our blue sky. So I'm going to take a moment and change back to the green thread. I'll just move Lucy a little so you can kind of see. Maybe I went in the way. Oh, you can see. This one tree is the one that I left unstitched. So we'll put green thread on and then stitch that last tree up. So if you didn't have a chance to watch this morning, you'll get a quick look at one of the trees. And you'll be happy to know I did figure out a thread path that allows me to do a whole tree with no stops and starts. I knew it could be done. It's just a puzzle I had to figure out. Would you keep the further away camera on for a moment, Dave, so I can get in there and change my spool of thread? So the thread I chose for the greens is just an avocado kind of mid-range thread. Just quickly changing that out. Let's take comments now, but I'll be 30 seconds getting back around to the front of the machine. And if you're getting a nice view of the back of my head, I apologize. A couple of weeks ago, I was a guest on a show about live streaming. If you were here this morning, you've already heard this story, but it's called Launch Your Live, in case you're interested in listening or in case you're a streamer and want some of his information. Anyway, we were talking about the challenges that are present in working with such a large piece of equipment. All right, bear with me because my knot didn't stick. So I now have to rethread that back end. That is going to take a minute or two. So, do you want to read me some comments, Dave, and I can talk through them? He says no, he's working on cameras. One thing at a time, right?
That's way more important.
I have never really gone through this process of threading on a show because it is so unique to whatever brand of machine you're quilting on. So I don't feel like that's necessarily helpful to the majority of you. There we go. Now I'm back up to where I can knot my threads together. And this does happen to me from time to time because the 100% poly thread is just a little bit slippery. And so sometimes those knots just slip right out. But in general, I just knot the two threads together and pull my new thread all the way up to the front, saving myself the rethreading process. Let's try it again. There we go. We're in business. Okay. Green thread loaded. I just have to turn my light on to thread my needle. Alrighty, on to the last tree. Oh yes, we were going to answer some questions. Let's do that. Sally, I just put in 2.5 hours on a digital print mountain scene. Dear husband brought it when he was unsupervised at a quilt show. You know, that's the best way. What a happy surprise. Sherry, I'm putting together my quilt from the Socialites Quilt Along. I almost have a finished quilt top. Awesome. Awesome. And Sally, how many hours do you put in with Lucy per day on the average? Oh gosh, it varies so much. Certainly I spend 35 to 40 hours a week in my sewing room, but sometimes it is sewing, sometimes it is writing a pattern, and sometimes it is quilting. Yeah, it's hard to say. And there are weeks and days that I do more and weeks and days that I do less. That's kind of one of the perks of being self-employed. For example, next week, my church is hosting a summer camp for youth. Woohoo! First one since the pandemic, and I'm the cook. So next week I'll be gone from Sunday through Friday, cooking for a whole bunch of hungry teenagers. I'm backing up. I really dislike that seam. I don't do this terribly often, but 2 reasons I'm doing it today. 1, it's awful. And 2, I'm thinking of entering this quilt in our local show this fall, so I'm paying a little bit of attention to getting things to be neat. Well, I always pay a little bit of attention, but I don't very often undo stuff. But this time I'm going to. I'm not sure if I'm in a place where you can see. Not that it matters. I bet you all know how to do this. But I saw that I had a tiny jog in the seam allowance. My angle didn't match up perfectly, and I was trying to accommodate that, and I overestimated how much it would take. So then I was stitching a really long ways from the ditch, and I didn't care for that. So we'll just quickly go back to the corner. There we go. I see Dave has the little cat cam going on steady for you guys. It's just kind of calming. It's as good as going to the spa, isn't it, to watch a black cat just sleeping. Okay, let's try this again. This time I'm just going to go with the edge of the fabric and I'll just jog when I get to the corner. It's really hard to keep an even ditching when you're crossing such thick seam allowances. Somehow when the ruler is resting on them, it joggles the long arm. So I just do the best I can. It's not perfect. Really thick area. Just take it easy. So one of the cool features about this new camera that we're absolutely loving is that it maintains a consistent light balance. So with the little webcam that we had on here before, when I would shift over lighter or darker places of the quilt, and this one would have been a terrible one because of the quite dark teal blue and then the light mountains, it would shift the light meter would cause it to shift brighter and darker, and we couldn't make it not do that. So with this camera, we can preset that focus and it just stays there. So hopefully that makes a much better viewing experience on your end. Okay, that was the last tree, all done. So now we're going to move into the mountains, which are my very favorite part. I'm going to move Lucy off. Shall I move right? No, I'll move left so that you guys can see a little something that I want to show you. Let me just grab it. So I've got my pattern here. Oop, Dave's going to change the camera. One sec. Got my pattern. And what I want to do in these various slopes so that they're distinct from each other, I'm going to alternate my stylized feathers with my matchstick quilting. So in alternate areas, alternate fabrics of the quilt. So to keep track of what goes where, I just put a piece of, well, I used kitchen paper, but kind of vellum, semi-see-through paper over top. And I just penciled in which areas are what so that I can refer to that and know at a glance. Am I putting a feather in this one or matchstick quilting? So we'll just keep that handy because we'll be needing it. And I'm laughing at the cat because he's still here, but now he is right under the long arm, so you can't even see him on the cat cam. But he's still here. So we're going to start right at the top of the mountains and work our way down. I'm going to try and get a whole slope in there at once if I can. Oh, now you guys get to see the bare feet at work. How nice is that? It's like those YouTube channels that have, you know, boxes of puppies and a camera's just trained on them all day. They just cheer you up. Oh look, I found a fragment of my broken needle. Well, I'm glad I found it on the quilt top and not on the carpet with my feet. Pardon me while I just walk and put that away in my little sharps container. Okay, so now we need to change to our white thread. So once again, my trick is to pull it out of the needle at the front so I can't inadvertently start stitching with the wrong color of thread. And we'll change out both the bobbin and the top thread. And for this area, I'm just going to use an eggshell. I actually might go just a shade darker than eggshell on the top, because as you can see, there's a number of shades of tan in that area. I'm just going to grab another thread here and have a peek. These are the types of decisions I sometimes just make while I'm working, neither before nor after. Well, not after, obviously. Yes, I think the mid-level one is good. I went ahead with the bobbin that I had pre-filled in the bottom. They're close to each other. They're just maybe 2 shades apart. In these white mountainous areas, I used several different types of fabric because I wanted to kind of play with having different textures as well. So the whitest one is a vintage tablecloth that had stains on it, so I cut it up. So I don't really know what its content is. I think it's mostly cotton, judging by the feel of it. And then the one tan fabric, which you can't really see, but you'll see as I get to quilting it, is a very loose weave. It looks kind of like canvas. It's not stiff. It just has a very loose weave, and it just adds a pretty texture, I think. One more way to put interesting into a quilt. Okay, we're all threaded. Now I'm going to refer to my trusty chart, and I'm doing matchstick on the top. Let me just make sure I've got this right in here. Okay, got it. I don't think I'll need my ruler for this mountain area. This morning when I was doing the geese above this, I was saying that I chose not to do the stitching in the ditch with the blue thread because I thought that I would do it with the white. But in looking back over my photos of the previous quilts I've done of this design, I actually didn't do edge stitching along the mountain. I just allowed the quilting to define the areas. So I'm going to give that a try. And unless I'm dissatisfied with that definition, that's what I'm going to go with. So my matchsticks are definitely less than a 1/4 inch, closer to an 1/8. You certainly could use a ruler to do these. I prefer to just do them freehand, but there's always the option. Gotta shift my feet a little bit. There's a really thick area. I'm probably going to get some good glimpses of the rolled up quilt here as I go over the tippy top of the mountain. Now you know what the quilt backing looks like. I'm just coercing my seam allowance right under the hopper foot. It did not want to go, that's for sure. I got it reasonably smoothly. Just referring to my rusty map again. All the way to the bottom. Just going ahead and laying in a number of these lines that are along the top with the matchstick, and then we'll get to the really fun part, which is the feathers. This is the fabric that has the really loose weave. So, you know, I wasn't 100% sure how it would look, how it would show up the quilting, but it seems to be fine. Probably not a fabric that I would use in a quilt that I thought would get, you know, drug around by a child and washed on a regular basis, but this one won't likely get that treatment. It's just going to be a lap quilt. So I think it will stand up perfectly well to ordinary usage. This morning when I was working on the sun, I drew some of my arcs that went in behind this mountain. I actually drew the arcs. So that's the little purple markings that you're seeing. They will fade overnight tonight. It's just an air erasable marker. And if I wanted them to be gone right away, I would just spritz them with water, but they're not hurting anything. There's some of our lines in. Now we shall go back and do some feathers. So let's just make sure that I can reach all the way to the bottom, and I cannot quite, so I have to advance the rollers just a little. Now I call these stylized feathers. Some people call them molars, some people call them hearts. You'll see why in just a second. They just have a kind of knobbly top on them. But they really lend themselves to fitting into kind of awkward shaped spaces. And I just particularly like them juxtaposed against the matchstick lines. That contrast, I thought, worked really well for defining these mountain slopes. You can see what I mean by fitting them into awkward shapes. I'm just bending them and squeezing them where I need them to go. And that's that one. Is it helpful if I move over it? Did you get a view as I was stitching? You can just see that contrast of the feather next to the little matchstick. I think looks so good. I just keep checking my book. You know, I could just go on thinking, yeah, I know what's next beside it. But I just keep checking. Okay, this little white one is... I could just bring the book up on the quilt. There's plenty of room. This little white one is a feather. Okay. And I started actually in this point on my last quilt. I can just kind of see the picture. I mentioned this morning I actually quilted the original that is on the pattern cover. And so that was my first one. But I'm going to decide to start in the corner. I'm not 100% sure which way I did it originally, and it doesn't really matter. I don't have to copy the same thing. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay, checking the next area. You know, they say Rome wasn't built in a day, but I'm here to prove that a mountain range can be assembled in a day. Squeezed in a little one there so I could get a larger one right at the bottom. Now this area that I'm right next to, I happen to know is fine lines, and I'm at an outer edge of it, so why not just quilt it while I'm here, right? Little matchstick lines, so we'll just go ahead and lay those in. Ooh, that's a little tricky to see, let me tell you, on that tiny gingham. Not gingham, but grid. You can see what I mean. Alright, I think we have to advance. Oh, I might be able to do one more line area. You guys are very quiet tonight. Are you busy cooking dinner, or? I can't see from where I'm at how many are here. I think this is the first time that I've done my live streaming at this time of day, so maybe that's the thing. But I did feel like one session was just too long to do this quilt. Slowly but surely, the mountains are appearing. The other nice thing about this matchstick quilting is it really helps to press down those bulky seam allowances, so whenever I can, I try and stitch over them in the corners. Oops, I've forgotten my little stretchers at the other end. I gotta pull those off before I advance a bunch. If anybody's got any questions so far, now's the moment. Maybe Dave will mute me for just a second while I take a couple swallows of water. I'm feeling very parched. Back in business. Just putting my side stretchers on again. Just measuring the areas that I can in fact reach. Start up here. And again, I'm just going to put an edge stitch along the trunk of this tree, because I'm not actually going to stitch it in gray at all. But that still needs definition to set it apart from the rest of the piecing. So from top to bottom of that trunk, I will make sure that it has some ditch stitching in it. One little area at a time. I'm not going to be able to stitch all the way to the bottom of this, so I'm going to pause right there. And I think without moving my stretchers at all, I can move Lucy forward the 2 inches or so that I need for clearance. Just double checking my pattern again that I'm in all the right places. There's a chubby one there. And I know I'm on the right track when the same fabric that has feathers here is getting feathers down here. Breathe a sigh of relief. It probably will be in the way, yes, too. Okay, I think that's everything that's at that height, so stretchers come off. take a second. That upper one has lines in it, so we'll just start here and do my little ditch stitching along this trunk so that it's well defined. I don't know if that's the prettiest feather I've ever made. This little one has lines, I know. So now that I've got so many of them done, I can actually refer back to the fabrics, which are the same slopes. And that helps me too to determine which are feathers and which are lines. If any of you are feeling inspired to make this quilt, I encourage you to do it. It was a really fun project for me. As best as I can recall, it's the first of Janet's patterns that I've ever made, and she definitely has a unique style, but I quite love it. And in this particular quilt, obviously, it's very pictorial, and hats off to Janet for even being able to envision how to break that down into pieces and create a pattern with it. But when I just followed it step by single step, it came together, and the only mistakes and things that I had to redo were my own, for sure. And so I think it's a great pattern if you're wanting something different to try. For me, there was a little bit more complexity because I chose to do my own fabrics instead of the ones that she recommended. So in the original pattern, she uses her own flannel prints, and so then there's a key, you know, this print goes here, A is this print, B is this print, K is this print, etc. Well, because I went with different fabrics, that all changed for me. So that was probably the most challenging thing, was figuring out then what went where. And so I took quite a bit of time before I even began cutting to lay out all my fabrics and figure out which one was going to be A and which one was going to be B, and so forth. And I made a little key with tiny swatches and labeled them all. And I really would have been lost without that. So that was critical. So I referred to that just continually as I was putting it together and as I was cutting. I can definitely see both this canvasy type fabric and the white vintage tablecloth one are very, they're not crisp and they don't hold their shape like cotton. So they're really shifting as I quilt. So probably it would have been wise to maybe starch them. Might have been wise even to baste my whole quilt, but that's kind of not my style. So it is what it is. As I so often say, I'm okay with imperfection. It's hand done. I want it to look like that, and it does. So I like to quilt with care, but not OCD-ness. So that's just where my personal tolerance level lies. Alrighty, lines, lines, this canvas bit, I keep calling it canvas though it really isn't. This is going to be all feathers, and it's done in several segments. So I'm going to travel. It certainly shows off the quilting pretty though, doesn't it? To the best of my knowledge, Jamie Wallen was the first person to use this shape of feather. So he deserves a lot of credit for bringing this shape to us long armors and quilters. It's pretty, and it's really, really versatile and useful. I think I'll just travel right around the base of this. I'm not thrilled about that little overshoot. But you know, it's getting late and it's staying. Okay, what have we left? Not too much. The central white area is all lines, and I have one area on the left with feathers. So I have to advance a couple inches to do the lines. And it too has a couple of separate little tiny blocks tucked in behind the trees. I want to be sure and catch all of those. I don't think I need my pattern anymore because I think I've got it. I'm just going to grab another sip of water. I'm just feeling so dry. Try not to gulp into the microphone. So I should give a brief overview again, because I think we've probably been here close to an hour. Yes, Dave? Oh gosh, hour and 20 he's telling me. Alrighty, quick overview then. I'm working on a quilt pattern called The Mountains Are Calling by Janet Nesbitt of One Sister Design. It's pictorial, as you can see. Mountains, trees, skies, flying geese to represent maybe clouds, maybe actual geese. So it's quite pretty. And I'm just trying to create some texture and interest with custom quilting. So this morning we had the first session. I already had the quilt loaded this time. So we went into some stitching in the ditch, doing some color changes, stopping and starting in the middle of the quilt. And we quilted the first bunch of geese and sky, and then a few trees and the sun in that first session. And then this evening now, second session, between time, I completed most of the geese and most of the trees, so I just did a couple more on camera, and then we went on to the mountains. And my goal here is to create some contrasts in textures so that the different slopes are separate and distinct from each other. So I've chosen to use matchstick lines and the kind of stylized, I call them molar shaped feathers. Some people call them heart shaped. But anyway, one kind of loose and rounded design and one quite tight and dense and straight, so that I get that contrast in texture. Janet's original pattern was written for flannels. She has her own lines of fabric, and so it was written with a particular line in mind. But I've already quilted several of those. In fact, I quilted Janet's cover photo that's on the pattern. That was the first one. And I've done a few client quilts since that are made with the same flannels. But I thought, you know, I'd really like to try that for myself and just give it a more contemporary twist. So with quilting cottons and play with textures a little bit. So that's what I did in my quilt. It's all out of my stash. I used things that I have on hand, including a vintage tablecloth and some weaves that are a bit looser and not really quilting cottons. And then I've got a retro bed sheet actually for my backing that has the same coppery, cinnamony sort of colors. So we're nearing the end of our mountains, and then we're going to go on into some of the grassy areas near the bottom of the quilt. We'll see how time goes. I don't know that I will fully finish it to the end. The grassy bits are going to be a bit time consuming because they're chopped up into smaller areas, so there's quite a bit of stopping and starting. But I do want to show you it, and the little grassy idea that I use is really, really simple. So it might be a quilting motif that you would like to use. So I'll show that for sure. And then we'll see how the time's doing at that point as to how far I continue with that. But either way, I will certainly post pictures of the finished project, so you'll get to see all of it at last. And then a couple of other things while we're here. This coming weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to be hosting an all-over feather boot camp. So that is, I'm teaching how to quilt an all-over feather that basically meanders over an entire quilt top. So I'm starting from square one with the shape of each individual feather or plume, and moving in how to make it turn corners and bend and fit in spaces, how to keep from painting yourself in a corner, and just generally how to move smoothly over an entire quilt top to have a really graceful and attractive design. So I'm doing that 3 sessions. So it's not like session 1, number 2, and number 3. It's 3 sessions that are all the same, just offered at 3 different times for your convenience. So my newsletter had those times. The links are also in the comments. So if you do want to attend, you will need to sign up, even if you are a newsletter recipient, just because that puts you in the little mini list that receives the reminders and the times and the direct links to the webinars. It is entirely free. You can attend 1 or 2 or even 3 if you want to. But if you attend 3, I expect you to be an expert at the end and come and teach the next one. Just saying. So that's next weekend. What else is on the horizon, Dave? Well, I guess I should say, with that feather boot camp, for the weekend I will be opening the enrollment into my freehand quilting masterclass. So at the end of the boot camp I will be introducing that. So if you've been wanting more details, that's a good way to find them. So that'll be the weekend, and then on Sunday I'm heading out to our church's summer camp. for youth that is going on for a week, and I will be cooking for a whole bunch of hungry teenagers all week. And our finale is always Friday morning, the final day. I do homemade cinnamon buns for everyone. Gosh, I can hardly wait to eat one myself. Oh, and the other thing I could mention is my podcast. So some of you have heard it, some of you may not have. You can find past episodes at podcast.stitchedbysusan.com. And the podcast is interviews with quilters and a couple of other crafters who are not necessarily quilters, who have stories to tell. Stories about what crafting has meant to them or has taught them. And they are interviews, but they're also just conversations. I try to keep them pretty informal. Let's see, we have some comments going on, and I need a break from my eyes. So, Pat, so fantastic. Watched in the kitchen until just now was baking 8 dozen Christmas cookies. It is July, right? Okay, Pat, seriously, are you in Australia? Or are you just making Christmas cookies for cuz? Any other comments? That's it. Boy, you guys are super quiet tonight. I hope I'm not just talking into a void. Yeah, you might need to say hello just so I don't fall asleep here. It's kind of like falling asleep at the wheel when you're driving. Pat is baking just for fun. How fun? This summer at my camp, because I've done this for about 10 years, and not surprisingly, we have a lower enrollment this year because, you know, parents are still being cautious and so forth. But typically, for a week of camp, I pack about 600 pounds of meat alone and all the other groceries on top. So it is a big old production and a lot of fun. You guys might need to put some comments in the chat window. Dave just remembered that a comment came up a while ago that he's forgotten about, so he's falling asleep at the helm. Okay, what is the comment? Northern Sioux. Thunderstorms over. Phew. Wow, good. Oh, Pat, you're hunkering down waiting for Elsa. Well, you know, at least you'll have cookies. You won't go hungry. Okay, I'm just double checking that I've gotten all the white bits. Oh, David Smith, some guy commented too. I'm making Susan a pot of coffee. She might need to pick me up. She does. It's been a longish day. All right, I think we're down to the grassy area. So I think I'll forward a little bit and then I'll try to give you guys a bit of an overview of what I'm doing. And I think I can get all the grass in one width. I think. Oh, Dave says you guys are commenting now. Well, you know what? I really appreciate that because I was feeling kind of sleepy. Let's see what's happening. Okay, I'll move Lucy a little bit so I can see you guys. Alrighty. As always, I have to take my glasses off to read the screen. Sally's still here, sometimes wandering. It happens. Yeah, Dave's commenting as me. Stay safe, Pat. Jill, I watched your feather boot camp last time and loved it. I highly recommend this workshop. I'm going to try to catch one of them this weekend. Yeah, you should. It's almost more than you can absorb in one session, but you're always welcome to come back for more and then to go and practice and come back again. Sally, I went to look at the pattern link. Oh, okay. Did you have a problem with it, or you just are telling me you went to look? In which case, fine. Oh, okay. Dave's saying don't go away. He thought I was leaving. I thought that was the end too. Okay. Sue, do you ever do jump stitches to get from place to place rather than cutting the thread? I have done, and I've kind of stopped doing that because it leaves a stitch that's attached to both ends on the bottom, which I can't see and avoid. And I have before gotten my machine hooked in it and then yanked on it, and then it pulls out a couple stitches, and then that to me was more time consuming than just cutting the thread. So, Denise Chapman, oh, is this live? Yes, ma'am, it is. I mean, eventually people will be watching it as a replay, but if you're commenting now, we're live. Northern Sue, awake and mesmerized by the quilting, just bringing this to life. Love watching, and I love this version of feathers. Thanks, Sue. I do too, and as I said, many thanks to Jamie Wallen for introducing that particular shape, because there's lots of places where I love to use it. Jenny, I'm quietly living vicariously through you. Had foot surgery to remove a giant screw and hopefully cure the long-term pain, and I'm not allowed to stand and use my long arm. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. That would... Dave is saying I would need therapy, and he's not wrong. Okay, on to the grasses. So I'm sure to you guys' point of view this is going to be backwards, but the original pattern had the word wander right here, and it was done in felt, which is kind of Janet's signature style, as were the eyes and nose details of the little fox. You guys can see? Yeah, you can see on there. So I'm not really a wanderer, so I chose to use the word explore. And then when I drew it out, it turned out a bit bigger than Janet's wander was. And so I kind of fudged things. So I moved the tail of my fox to the other side because it seemed to me that that worked equally well. And I put my explore in here. And I do not currently have any felt. So my poor fox has no eyes or nose, but he'll get them, I promise. Either I'm going to go get some felt, or I may embroider the details on. Either way, I will add his details, but I wanted to at least quilt his tail in. So tail and word, I put a fusible backing on, and they're machine appliqued in place. There's a comment. Rose, watching you is so soothing and mesmerizing. Thank you for time you spend showing your wonderful talent. You're so welcome. Just don't be so soothed and mesmerized that you fall asleep, okay? And another Sue. I swear there are more Sues quilting. I love it. Watching from Fort Benton, Montana. Very helpful. Thank you. You're welcome. It's quite fun for me too. So I'm going to go ahead and do the fox because he's in the middle. And you know my system. When I have areas that are unquilted, I like to do what's in the middle and then work my way out, as opposed to starting at one side and risking pushing fabric and things off to one side. Makes sense? So we'll just start at the fox, and we're going to stitch in his little ditches. I don't think there's a particularly efficient way to stitch around this fox. Whoa! See, I'm busy talking to you guys. I'm stitching the fox in white thread or tan thread. Silly me. So that has to come out. I want my coppery thread back on for this. I was starting to say I don't think there's a particularly efficient way to stitch around him. I'll just overlap where I need to. And for my machine applique, I just used, I think it's sometimes called a buttonhole stitch. Just a simple one stitch forward, one stitch in, one stitch back out to the edge. That kind of thing. And I just did it in matching thread, so it's pretty highly invisible. Okay, we've got to change thread here. Bear with me while I do that. Mr. Cameraman's not here to change angles for you because he went to work on the coffee, which I'm so grateful for. So I am using, for those of you who are new this evening, I'm using Isacord thread, which is my favorite. It is 100% polyester, and it is 40 weight thread. I like to use polyester on my long arm all the time for its strength. Because I'm stitching at high speeds, and all long arms are, it makes sense to use a poly thread. And I particularly like Isacord because it has so many different colors. Over 300 colors, I might add. And I keep, just as a piece of trivia, I keep about 50 in my studio at all times. Now I quilt for clients, so that's kind of why so many. I do use them. You know, they're not sitting here just for years at a time. But that just gives you an idea, and I really love the freedom of having, you know, even when I want copper, I can go light, medium, or dark, copper colored. I like that. Isacord was originally designed with embroidery machines in mind, like commercial machines that do, you know, graphics, caps, and coats and things like that. And so it is built for high-speed machines and is consequently very suited to a long arm. There are other thread manufacturers that make 100% poly too. Lots of them do. Superior's one of them. And they're perfectly fine. I just got started with Isacord early on, and my machines have liked it, and so I have just thought, if it wasn't broke, I wouldn't fix it. Okay, we now have copper thread for our little fox. And this is a light copper, and I chose that because of the grassy areas. As you can see, they have the coppery stripes, but the background of it is paler, and so I kind of went middle of the road with my thread color, so that I could use the same thing around fox and words and in my little grassy bits that I'll be quilting. The sharp-eyed folks out there might notice too that I changed the shape of the tail on my fox. That was just a matter of personal preference. I'm just taking a second to stitch down the bits of his white tail. I did use fusible web to attach that, but that alone will not hold it, so I needed to stitch it as well. And I think probably I should do some quilting inside his tail. Gosh, what do we want to do? I think we'll just do basically an echo. And maybe even another tiny one. So almost flame shaped in there. I think that works. And likewise on his face, I feel like it needs some additional quilting, so we're just going to put an echo in there. I think when we put his two eyes and his nose on there, it will still look very foxy. Now for all these letters, I'm pretty much going to freehand the outside of them. It may not be perfect. Actually, if I start at the bottom, I think I can stitch my way right in through to the center of the E. I think that will save me a bit of time too, and a thread break. But I will give you a tip that I use a lot of times when I'm working on applique, and that is any ruler, even a straight edged one, will help you if you're not comfortable just freehanding around applique, just because it gives you something to push against with your hopper foot. So you see what I mean? It obviously doesn't have the right curve, but it still prevents my hopper foot from running amok because it's got something to lean against. E is for explore. A couple of my letters are joined, so I won't have to cut thread for every single one. Certainly Janet's wander word lent itself more to doing it with joined letters. These particular letters did not so much. Nevertheless, I liked the word explore. Tails. Alrighty, so Dave was just commenting to me that some of the things, like for example in this E where I kind of backtracked over, is highly visible because it's really zoomed in. But I'm just going to tell you, looking at it from straight on, I'm satisfied with how that looks, and so I'm leaving it as is. I'm going to start at the bottom of this. Okay, so all that's left is the grassy bits, grassy knolls, if you will. So as I did with the White Mountains, I'm going to take the time to stitch in the ditch along my tree trunks. And I feel like it's easier to do this grass from the bottom. So all I do is make these little hillocks and then little sprigs. Super, super simple. And they're super irregular. And they're just kind of stacked one upon another loosely. And of course, it's the quilter's prerogative how many or how few they want to put in. I'll do one more. So that's that little area. Let's take a few comments while Susan gets a little cuppa going on here. A little bit of coffee. You guys know me, I love my coffee. All right. S-curves make great fur. They do, and I honestly hadn't thought of putting more detail inside the fox's body, but I might reconsider that as I go by because I like that idea. Scoot Lucy over a little more. Rose, Isacord thread is fantastic. I use it for both machine embroidery and quilting. Yeah, it is great thread. I do really like it. Just in case, Rose, I don't know if you have a business or not, but if you do, consider trying to get it wholesale from them because the price is really good too if you buy it wholesale. Mickey, I have also used Isacord for several years for my long arm. It's really good thread. I very much like it too. Sally, the sit-down long arm seems to like it better than glide, and I do like Isacord for embroidery. You know, different machines do seem to have different preferences, so it's worth trying different brands of thread. But as I said, I got started with Isacord and I liked it, and my first Lucy liked it, and so does this one, so I've just not changed. So this is Dave commenting as me. We're streaming in 2K, great for watching on your TV if you have the YouTube app loaded. There you go. So yeah, TV or a larger monitor if you want to see things bigger. That way you can see every gray hair. All right. I think we're all right. We're just measuring up the tripod. This is so Jenny is asking if I buy 1,000 or 5,000 meter spools. I buy 5,000 only. The 1,000 will generally do a quilt, but if it's a queen size quilt and it has a good deal of detail, it won't even do that. And then what good is it to me if I have just a little smidge of a color? That's my personal preference though, which has to do with, you know, how much quilting I do. So sipping my coffee reminds me, I do have this little support program if you guys are interested. It's called buymeacoffee.com. And you can go there, and for the price approximately of one simple coffee, you can make a one-time contribution, or you can choose a monthly membership if you like to support my coffee and cream habit. But you do know it's not actually buying coffee and cream, right? I think I've talked about that already today a couple times. So what we're using it for is to improve our cameras and our production. So what you're seeing today is our latest camera edition. It's a GoPro that we have mounted on Lucy, and it is really helping, we feel like, to reduce the vibration, and it is super, super, super clear. So we're very happy to have been able to do that. So that's kind of what my goals are. So when you do support, that's where it goes. Is we're trying to make a better production quality. So that's my simple grass right there. This is going to be fiddly in by the word. So I'm going to go ahead and do it from the bottom up again, just because that helps me spatially to see where to place the grass. Theoretically, you could do it, you know, from top or bottom. You're not stitching over the grass. I just have a hard time visualizing where it goes. So I just kind of do these little 2 and 3 sprig bits of grass. Super simple. And I think I will do what is above the letters in a separate sweep. So maybe what I'll do here actually, because I think we're over 2 hours, aren't we now, Dave? Or close to it?
An hour 51.
Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and do this larger area along the bottom, and then I think I'll probably leave the last bit for finishing after we close down this session. There's not a whole lot of excitement left. There aren't any new techniques left. This is it. You've seen all the different areas of the quilt. So we've done the stitching in the ditch. We've done thread color changes. We've done stopping and starting in the middle of the quilt. We've done the tree, the mountain, the grass, and the geese areas. We've even done the appliqued letters. So you've gotten a good sampling of all the things that are in this project. So if you have found ideas here today that are helpful and that you use in your quilting, I would absolutely love to see pictures. Feel free to tag me in them on Facebook or Instagram. I'd love to see what you're working on and see how this has been helpful to you. Even if it's just the thought of using quilting to create textures, particularly like I did in the mountains, those contrasting textures that just bring dimension into it. I'd love to see how you interpret that. Now here I believe I can travel and get a few sprigs in this E without too much difficulty. And any little area I do now is one I don't have to come back and do later. I think I'll keep going all the way across to the L. And we'll leave it it right there. Okay, a few more comments. Another sip of coffee for me. And I am holding my coffee off the quilt, just so you know. Okay, yeah. Jenny, I'm just starting my collection of thread. Yeah, and absolutely it takes time, and certainly when I started, I didn't have that many. I was lucky enough to find a lady who was a long armor going out of business and sold me her stock. I think I started with maybe 15 colors of partial spools. And then what I did is just as I needed a color for a quilt, I would get that color in and just gradually added 2 and 3 colors here and there. And, you know, 1,000 quilts into it. Now I carry about 50 spools pretty regularly. Susan, I'm not quite 50 yet, and you have less gray than I. You look fantastic. Well, you know, yeah. It's quite a while since I decided to just embrace it, and it is what it is. I've earned them. I'm proud of them.
I don't know who this guy is.
Dave wonders if they should let me off camera after 5 hours today or make her go the full 6. Well, the thing is, there is still a bit of time because I need to do inside the E and the P and the O and etc. So that is all going to take a little bit of time. So I think I'll finish this one section that I'm on of the grasses, and then you have a pretty good idea of what's going on there. Sally is saying this has been really helpful. I love watching quilters at work. Thanks for sharing your skill. I really do hope this is helpful to just see it in real time. I know that was something I would have given my eye teeth for when I was beginning. So Pat, beautiful work. Enjoy another cup of coffee. Put your feet up. Wish I could send you some cookies. Oh boy, I do too. Trust me. Now I want to go to work on a quilt because of your show, but tomorrow is another day. It sure enough is. And you know, I'll be quilting tomorrow too, so think of me while you're quilting. And Jill, thanks to Dave and Susan. It was a great day. Good. I'm so glad you found it helpful. And this is going up on YouTube. I mean, that's where we're recording now, and we're leaving it there. So it's available for replays at any time. So you can always refer back. Northern Sue, after this coffee, she'll be back for session 3. No, not today. Okay, so I'll finish up these little bits of grasses. I do very much like the idea, I can't remember which of you floated it now, of using the S-curves to represent the fur of the fox. Jenny. So I'll have to explore whether I want to give him more details or whether I'm going to leave him with not very much quilting. I'm just going to tighten up the quilt one notch. I've got a bit of buckling going on there. Actually, I'll show you guys a little trick. See this buckling that's happening with the quilt? Okay, I'm going off camera for a minute and I'll show you one of my little tricks. So certainly one way to deal with it is to have your left hand kind of holding and manipulating the fabric. But here's another way of dealing with it. See my little vegetable cans? And when I put them on both sides or even on the front, can you see that? Just the weight of it kind of distributes that excess, and then I can quilt it down without any pleats and then take my weight off and it will go back in place. So that's not my original idea, I'll be real honest up front, but it is a great idea and really helpful sometimes when you can't quilt with one hand, but you need something to help distribute that fullness. And because they are round and you lay them on their side, they actually roll out of the way when you come to them. So you don't thump into them either. This grass really could not be simpler. It just adds a very simple texture. And there I am pulling with my finger a little just because I want to distribute that fullness. If I don't, I would have gotten a pleat right at the top there. And fullness I can deal with because when I wash the quilt and use the quilt, that will all soften and look like it was meant to be. Pleats, I don't care for. So. Okay, that's our section of grass. So I will scroll over it with the camera so you can get a good look at it, how that texture worked out, and then I think we're going to call it a day. And of course, I will post pictures of the finished quilt so you'll get to see all the details. So it's kind of upside down, which does not look wonderful on your camera, but you'll get to see it better in the pictures. So it's just the simple little spriggy grass. And here it is under the fox and the explore word. Just fills it in quite nicely. So there you have it. That is The Mountains Are Calling, mostly complete. And I'm so glad you guys have joined me today. This has been really fun and I hope helpful for you. I mean, that is my ultimate goal, is to just give you a little window into what quilting looks like for me in real time. And honestly, I learned from you guys too. People have shared different tips, like the lady who talked about the S-curves tonight for the fox fur, and just different shortcuts and tips. It's really fun to be able to get together and share some of our knowledge with each other. So thanks for joining me. I will be back for another Live and Unscripted, I believe, 2 weeks from today. Again, if you've signed up for my newsletter, you will get advance notice of those events as they're coming, or you can watch on my Facebook page, Stitched by Susan. And I thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. Have a great rest of your day. Good night.